Okay, hello everyone. We're going to start with a bow in the four great vows. Please bow. Four great vows. I vow to deliver innumerable sentient beings. I vow to cut off endless vexations. I vow to master limitless approaches to Dharma. I vow to attain supreme Buddhahood. Welcome to you all. We're going to continue on with the topic of Noumenon and Phenomenon. Noumenon, as I explained last week, is kind of the denominator of everything, and also you could say the matrix of everything, where everything develops from. And the noumenon is that which is an appearance. One is the ground, and one is what is built on it. It's kind of interesting because if you study crystals, crystals are generally developed on a matrix. They don't just develop out of air, but they have to have a basis or a foundation on which to develop as a crystal. And so is the same with all appearances. Now, when we talk about mind, it is something that is not necessarily an easy topic to discuss, because we're so accustomed to referring to the thoughts running through our head as mind. And so we believe then mind is consciousness, what we're aware of, what we're experiencing, all of the emotions, all of the forms we see, how we perceive things, how we interact with other things, all of these things, then what we feel from them. All of these things we believe to be mind, and that we are traversing through this world. So it's not easy for us to come to a reckoning that this world is a dream. Even though we talked about it last week with the Diamond Sutra, first thing in terms of the Diamond Sutra is a negation of things that there's no form. Even the Buddha cannot be known by the forms, and that there is something that's more valuable than anything in the samsaric world. So no matter how many, if you gathered up all the gold, all the jewels that have ever been mined and polished, and you put them in a giant pile, they could not, none of that could replace hearing 4 lines of the Diamond Sutra. And you go, well, that doesn't even make any sense. I can't take that. That sounds more like a Bitcoin than it does actually something real, but it isn't in this way. It is actually the truth, but we don't understand that. We can't, because we ourselves, our idea of ourselves, our ego, is a dream. It's an illusion, but we don't know that. So it's difficult for us to do that. But if we begin to come about to listening to what I'm saying, listening to what other masters talk about, what the sutras talk about, the ancient masters, you will see there's this line of consistency through all of this that points to what I'm talking to you now. But it's hard because you go, I don't understand that. I try to move through this table, my fist through the table, but I can't move my fist through the table. It is real. And to me, it's real because my fist stops and I hear a noise when I bang on it. So it has to be real. But if you're in a dream, you're traversing in a dream, and you believe that to be real until all of a sudden you wake up and go, that was a dream, but it seemed to be real. And in a dream functions on a different reality. It functions on a reality and time and space and physical properties that could only happen in a dream. as the mind is putting all sorts of different occurrences together and things, mashing it all up and going, oh, this, you can fly, or you can do this, or you're in prison, or you're the richest person in the world, or whatever. You're in this dream. You believe that all of those things can happen. When you wake up from the dream, you wake up into another dream, which is this world. It's hard for us to understand that or to accept that this world is a dream. But if you keep pressing the matter, pressing it, staying in the present moment, little by little, you will see that there's some cracks in this reality, things that don't quite always match up perfectly in terms of it. And you begin to see things that are also consistent, which we call karma, or causes and conditions never fail. When you begin to see, oh, because of this, if I plant a melon seed, I get a melon fruit. And you begin to see things, how they work and how they're connected. If I smile, people smile back. If I frown, they frown back, or they suspicious of me, or whatever. All of the things that we do, how we begin to look at the world changes, where we are looking at it with the aspect of wisdom. This wisdom is twofold. One is the worldly wisdom. And the worldly wisdom is fine. That gets us along in the world. There is this other wisdom, which I'll call an esoteric wisdom, that is this wisdom that goes beyond the borders of this dream. The worldly wisdom is good wisdom that we can use. A penny saved is a penny earned, all of those types of things that we think about, that we have wisdom about. The other wisdom is a wisdom that transcends this dream. It dares to step out of this dream. And maybe it's difficult for us because what we want to do is, if this is the border of the dream, we want to push out of the dream. But we can't do that because this body, this sense of ego, is a fabrication. It's within the bubble in the stream. And it cannot, if you pop that, it all disappears. It cannot go into the absolute. It is fabricated and created by the absolute, but it is not the absolute. And again, if you don't believe me, come back in 250 years and we'll have this argument and see, who shows up. But the thing is that what we're looking at is this idea of the absolute. We cannot conceive of it. So we have Noumenon and Phenomenon, but we also have then the conceivable and the inconceivable. So all of these are the same viewpoints. One of them is the right viewpoint in looking at it and seeing the things as they are. The other one is from the conceivable looking and trying to see the inconceivable, which it can't. But at least we can have the worldly wisdom to understand that there's something else. And that is what we use as our foundation to be able to spring off of. And that's very, very important for us to have that kind of a foundation. The other part that we look at this is when we talk about the conditioned and unconditioned, this is also the same one. So you're going to see these in the sutras and in the writings of the Chan masters about conditioned and unconditioned. So the unconditioned is something that's there. We can call it right now the matrix, what everything is built upon. That's immutable. Immutable means that it has no time span. and you get to my age and you have like a shelf life of a banana, and you're very aware of that. You're aware of that, and you make the best you can out of it. But even those who are young, time comes up very, very quickly. All you have to do is ask the ones that are older how fast time flies. So we understand that. We understand that there's this unconditioned, which is mind. And this is what the Buddha used as an example. And he mentioned to one of his followers, it was the king, and he was telling the king that when you were young, you went to the Ganges River and you saw the waters of the Ganges River. Yes. And so you see yourself as a little boy. Yes, I can see myself as a little boy. Now you go to the Ganges River, you can still see the Ganges River. Yes, I can see the Ganges River. And he said, well, are the waters the same? And he said, no, it's not the same water. The water is constantly flowing. And he said, yes. And then are you the same as you were when you were a young boy? He goes, of course not. I'm old now. I have a gray beard. My body aches. I'm at close to the end of my life. And he said, that which saw the Ganges River when you were a boy, is it different than the one that sees it now? No, it's the same. And he said, so is it with everyone, because this is mind. Your mind does not get old. You may, because of causes and conditions, lose your mind or have dementia, but the faculty of mind is still there. It's always present. We don't understand that. We don't understand that this very mind that we're using is this mind of the Buddha. And just like Master Ling Chi said, we cut off our head and then proceed to look for our head. It doesn't make any sense. All of this fits together so perfectly. Everywhere you look, the Dharma is the same. It's ekayana, just this mind. And so when we're looking at it, we understand that. We understand the condition is there. The condition is something that arises in mind, created by mind. And so we begin to understand that and become aware of it in the present moment, and aware of that it is conditional and is a result also of habitual patterns. So when you find the habitual patterns, then you let go of those. Those things are the things that are creating these appearances. Left to itself, the mind need not have these appearances. We have also what is called the dreamer and the dream. And so we confuse the dream with the dreamer. This is a fatal mistake. It is a fatal mistake because when you are trying to redeem or to have salvation for the dream, it cannot be, because it's just a mist, a puff of smoke. It's momentary. And no matter how much you think, I think, therefore I am, I think, and this is me, and this is also mine, it is not in this way. It is as if the ego stands before your viewpoint and serves like a filter for things coming in and saying, I like this, I don't like that. I like ice cream, I don't like stinky tofu. Or I like stinky tofu, I don't like ice cream. It all depends on how you look at things in terms of it, but there's this filter there that's not necessary that we call ourself. And we confuse that as the object and purpose of awakening or enlightenment. We want to enlighten that filter. We can't, though, because it's not really the foundational mind or absolute mind. It is an appearance within mind. Now, we can't pull it off any more than I could pull right now from the screen and lift you off of the screen. You appear in the causes conditions in this way, in an electronic way before me. But that does not mean that I see you. And this was a difficult thing. Once one young monk was saying to the Shifu, the Shifu says that he doesn't see the people. He says, but Shifu, I see you. And the master, he just said, but I don't see you. How can that be? Of course, he has eyes, he can see him, but he sees through the filter. He sees through the filter. What he sees is the Buddha. That's how we see things. Now, do you want to harm people if you see the Buddha? No. You want to help them. Even the ones that appear to be so foul and profane, all the more so they need our pity and our help. Not an easy thing to do. It's very difficult, but it is something that we use, which is a non-discriminating mind. We keep practicing it, trying to get better at it. I cannot say I've removed the filter completely. I haven't, but I'm a practitioner. I try. I do my best, and I set about to do the things that are necessary to be a good person, to help people, to care for each and every one of you, even though I know each and every one of you and your names are an illusion. But beyond that, what has always been there has been the heart. You're not separate from that heart. Of course, there's going to be compassion there. How would you not? We talk about the saying, the idiom, cutting your nose to spite your face. It is in that way, anytime you cause harm to other people, you're cutting your nose to spite your face, because they're no different than you. Their suffering is the suffering in mind, created by mind. We don't understand that, but we should, because it changes the way we look at things. So today's lecture is one that's trying to build upon all of this and using all these fancy terms of conceivable, inconceivable, noumenon, phenomenon, condition, unconditioned, apparent, and absolute. Nagarjuna in the 1st and 2nd century set upon trying to figure out how to present a practice that was correct. And it's not easy, because he looked at all of the different disciplines during that time period. All of the disciplines on what are referred to in the sutras as heterodox practices, many different types of practices, but saw when they opened their mouth, they were done. And Nagarjuna presented a method, and he used one that was already established during that time period, of debate in which one does not take a position contrary to somebody else's position. So it's not my God can beat up your God type of an approach. It's saying establish the premise of the reality and truth of your position, of how you see things and how you see whether it's the soteriological or epistological approach to it, or existential approach to it. How do you see how you're created? What's the purpose? What is the teachings? And as the people opened their mouth and trying to establish it, he would undercut them and refute their positions because they could not even establish the succinctly that time existed, that space existed. And so everything that they built upon that could not be established. And what he was doing was undercutting the validity of the appearances and anything that is based on appearances. And if your logic was based on appearances or this world, it was faulty and you could cut it down. If you then tried to explain something as to your position, it could equally be done. It's very interesting because the philosophers and the philosophy historians, they're always pointing to how Nagarjuna was using this theory, but never advancing anything else. So he developed this two truths doctrine. And in the two truths doctrine, we have apparent reality and absolute reality. In the apparent reality, he's saying this is a truth because these things appear, but they're transitory. But they appear, and I cannot separate them from the absolute reality, because if I did, it would be like breaking the crystal off of the matrix. It couldn't work that way. You have to see it in the totality of it. This is not something that can be reasoned out with words. But in looking at it and saying the absolute reality, that's the immutable, that is the unconditioned, the noumenon, the absolute inconceivable. That is the dreamer. That is mine. Appearances, though, are not separate from mine. It can't be in this way because you would break the whole premise of this particular approach of analysis of seeing things. And we cannot say that one is real and one is not real, or both are real or both are not real. There's this tetralemma there. But Nagarjuna kept quiet, not because it was a debate ploy. It wasn't that he was interested in winning the debate. I will give you an example of what he was doing. In the Vilamakritti Sutra, there is a example there in which all of these bodhisattvas discuss what emptiness is, and they go on eloquently to describe what they believe is emptiness. When they get to Manjusri, Manjusri says, emptiness cannot be talked about, so we should not talk about it. And then when they went to Vilamakritti, Vilamakritti was a layperson, but was a very advanced bodhisattva. And they asked him, what do you think? And he didn't say a thing. this is where Nagarjuna got the inspiration. Because in this moment of not saying anything, one doesn't take a position within samsara. It is, as in the Vilamakritti Sutra, an invitation to explore beyond the realms of the samsaric world. And in doing this and exploring beyond the realms of the samsaric world, one has to jettison reason and cogitation, not in a ridiculous way, where one just uses their imagination to imagine anything, but they have to let go of these rules that confine the mind, that lock it up into samsara. So when I talk about contemplation, it isn't a cogitation where you're sitting there like Rodin's thinker going, what is mind? What is mind? And you're trying to think it through. It isn't in this way. What it is that the mind is still. There's no mind activity going on because there need not be mind activity. Yet the mind is incredibly active. Even though it's just sitting, the mind is completely aware in the present moment. But this awareness is different than the perception from the five skandha. In the perception of the five skandha, one would maybe hear a car backfire. What's that? And it would be startled, and it would have thinking, oh, maybe it's just a car backfiring, or it could be somebody outside with a gun or whatever, and it would go in this way. When the mind is still, and there's, let's say, an auditory experience, something from the hearing, the mind instantly realizes that, and it doesn't process through the emotional part. It doesn't process through other things. It's like if you've ever been in a restaurant, and this happened many times, where all of a sudden the server will drop a bunch of plates on the floor. Have you ever had that experience? Or someplace where there's especially if it's China, it's really very loud. And people go, what's that? What's that? What? Wow. And they're looking all around to do that. When that happens, normally I don't move, because instantly I know what has happened is that somewhere in the room, plates have fallen. If they fall close to you, then your function is help them pick up the plates, clean it up. It doesn't matter whether they're waiting on you or not. You just help them. But if it's somewhere else, the mind is aware of that. It doesn't have to get startled by that, and it can see the things very, very clearly. Doesn't mean that I'm enlightened. I'm not enlightened, but it means that the mind is very aware, and it processes things not in a linear way, but in instantaneous information that bypasses the sensations of the skandha. And all of those emotions, they don't get there. There's no startledness there. It just is the way it is. And if you can do that, it will work. Probably a long time ago, I stopped going to amusement parks. I'm probably too old to get on a roller coaster or whatever. But I remember going to them, and you see the people, and they're going by, and they go up, and they go back that way, and they're all screaming. And I'm going, I wonder what it's like if I keep my mind still. So it was very, very strange, because I'm on this ride, and I'm going very fast. I'm going up high. I'm going up. Now I'm going down. I'm making a loop. okay, I'm upside down, I'm coming this way, and I'm coming that way. It really was a buzzkill. It was like I wasn't excited at all, and I might as well have been a crash test dummy on the ride because I was just experiencing it, but no, there was no sensation. It was a very odd thing of doing. So I went, that kind of killed my thrill for that. Not that I do that all the time, but it was just an interesting thing to be able to neutralize all of those things. So this idea of talking about emptiness, and when there's this not talking about it, Nagarjuna was not debating this point. He was demonstrating the point. The difficulty is that if people wanted to try to debate with him, they would be debating with a mechanical puppet because they would not be able to find Nagarjuna. And that was the thing that was difficult and why he was so successful, because he was using the awakening of the mind to see things as they are. And so when you read from Nagarjuna, his all of his training that he gives us at treatises, you will see that in there, that he's doing that. In the beginning, it's kind of like, first, it's difficult to understand. And then second, it's difficult to believe. There's something inside of you that says, don't listen to that. That doesn't make any sense. That defies logic. It defies samsaric logic, true, but not the logic of the Buddha mind. It's a different language, a different approach. It is not a structural mind. It's not a linear thinking. Linear meaning that it's sequential. Everything is there at one time. And if one can stay in the present moment, keep the mind still, all appearances will all just neatly align and connect and say, because of this, this is happening. Because of this, this is happening. This is what I should do. This is what I should say. Everything connects perfectly together, precisely because you are seeing from where it came from, the so-called past, to this present moment, and what, if you do this, what will happen in the future. And you're programming it at this time. You're going, I want this and this and this and this to happen, and then these things will happen. And so you see the things in a way, and you understand them in a way in which you can use it in a harmonious way. And that's very, very important, is that we have to be able to harmonize, because we're harmonizing with the self-nature of mind. All of you, the mind that you're using, we need to harmonize together. Can you imagine that? If we could harmonize together? When we work towards presenting the Dharma or supporting the Dharma, that's what we're doing. We're harmonizing together, and it's absolutely beautiful. A while back, Sue was in need of some money for a funding of a Chan Hall in Virginia. And so many people came together in probably 48 hours to provide money so quickly. Everybody was harmonizing, and it was beautiful. Imagine if all the time we exerted ourselves in this way, what we can accomplish together with this mind. This is compassion. This is the meaning. So Nagarjuna didn't want to argue about things and argue what things are nihilistic or not. He just presented the invitation there that goes, I've taken you as far as I can go. Here are the two truths. You have to go further. You have to go as far as you can, as far as you dare. So you have to be a bodhisattva warrior. You have to not fear going forward. And that's important. So when you're sitting to meditate, don't fear. Don't fear you're going to get bored or the pain is going to be too much. Just simply sit. It will go away. You will be sitting in a bliss. And as long as you don't feel that this individual is experiencing this bliss, you can move forward. You have to push beyond that sensation of a bliss into changing it into a non-conscious way of approaching things. The difficulty we have with our practice is that all along the way, the ego steps in and tries to divert us into a different way or collect some kind of a shallow accomplishment. Sometimes people get something and they go, wow, this is so great. And it's very, very shallow. But to them, they think, I've never felt this, so this must be I'm on my way to enlightenment or whatever. And it shouldn't be in this way. Shufu always talked about that we should practice as if we were walking up a fog-enshrouded mountain. We know each step is a step up, but we don't know where the top is. It is when we abandon the idea of where that top is that where we make progress. And that progress will naturally come along naturally by the self-nature of mind, so long as the ego, illusory ego, doesn't get in the way. If the illusory ego does not get in the way, mind will just keep steadily marching and steadily clarifying. As we awaken, the awakening is simply that seeing that this world is not real. Again, there's two ways of awakening. One of them is the awakening via the wisdom of the samsaric world. But we have to push on. We have to continue to contemplate. Again, contemplation here isn't you're contemplating anything. You're just simply letting the mind rest in the present moment. I don't want that to be unclear. This contemplation is just simply letting the mind rest, nothing more than that. So you're not thinking about anything or trying to conjure up anything. You're just letting the mind stay in the present moment. Just let it be still there. The mind will take care of the rest. You just stay there and stay there and stay there. And it's kind of like a train stops, picks you up and takes you. And then all of a sudden you get to unified mind. And that's where the birds are chirping, the clouds are passing by the blue sky, and the grass is green, and deer are walking by, and it's so idealistic. And you feel like you're in some kind of an old Disney cartoon singing Zippity Doo-Dah. It isn't in that way. If you get there, you got to get out of there right away. You can just be stuck in unified mind. And remember, if you start fixating on birds chirping or the ducks flying by or the geese flying by or whatever, the wind or the sun play upon the trees or whatever, get out of that. That you're just indulging in physical experiences. Mind is not like that. Mind is not like that. It's not a cheap thrill. You don't have to pay any attention to that, nor should you. You just stay on the train. And so when you see they're calling out unified mind, stay on the train. Just keep going. Don't stop there. Stay and you keep using your method. Stay contemplating. Contemplating again is just simply staying in the present moment. Contemplation is actually the lack of cogitation. It is just simply the experience of everything without any kind of an opinion about it or discrimination about it. It just simply resting the mind. If you rested your mind, if you heard a duck going by, it neither titillate your senses or bother you. If a dog barks, it's the same thing. If a car goes by and backfires, same thing. It doesn't matter. You just simply are resting. And when you get up off that cushion, you're resting. All of the time, you're resting in mind, the mind that you have. The very thing that you're looking for, you already have it. You just don't understand it because you've gotten so habituated in the dream that you've mistaken yourself for this mechanical puppet or red meatball. You don't understand how to separate that red meatball from mind. We get into the sticky subject of consciousness. And consciousness is one of those things that's difficult to talk about because people say, well, the consciousness is necessary or an aspect of mind. It is the same as a rotting apple. You go, wow, that doesn't sound very appetizing. I don't mean it to sound appetizing. You shouldn't be titillated by the consciousness. You shouldn't do it in this way. Consciousness is just momentary evaluations of appearances. So those momentary evaluations of appearances, what makes them so special? Who is seeing them? How is that working? If everything returns to the one, and the one returns to what? We can't give that a name. So the consciousness is just this, let's say, part of this ethereal mist. Mind is greater than that. Mind is what sets everything into motion. If you look up at the cosmos in the nighttime, and you see everything in the firmament there blinking away, that's all created by the mind. It is just in this way, created by the mind. There is no lasting substance to it, even if we say it's 9 billion years old, or that we're looking at the farthest reaches of the cosmos and saying that light traveled 9 billion years to get to here. Really, like on whose clock? On the cosmic clock, or the watch that you have on your hand? We have to put everything into the proper perspective. So what I'm trying to do is demystify this idea of noumenon and phenomenon and let you see it from many different angles coming at it. And maybe one of these angles might hit for you and might get you to see things a little bit differently. All of these things have been taught in the sutras. All of these terms I brought up today, they're all in the sutras. You don't believe me, just pick up any sutra and start reading, and you'll run into one of these, whether it's noumenon, phenomenon, conditioned or unconditioned, apparent or absolute, conceivable, inconceivable, dream or dreamer. all of these things are there. And they're not separate. They're not different. They're just used in the context of whatever's being presented there to help you understand this. But we fixate on that we want to bake a cake. And our way of baking the cake is we've got to get all of the pieces together and put everything there and set the temperature, mix the eggs and the milk and butter, whatever it is, put it in a pan, put it into the oven, and time it to make sure we don't burn it. And that's the way we practice. That is from the viewpoint of the five skandha practice of adhering to the precepts, the Eightfold Path of Paramitas, etc. But in this moment, we are capable of creating that cake in our mind. We're capable of doing so much with it. Those properties of baking that cake on Venus wouldn't work. And if you're on Mars, I imagine you'd probably burn it within a couple of seconds. So it doesn't work in this way. There's not a constant there. The constant that they talk about, the immutable, that doesn't change, is mind itself. So the sequence of lectures I started last week are an invitation, like Nagarjuna, for you to explore, for you to use as a foundation, like Huineng's Platform Sutra, into the practice. How many of you have read Huineng's Platform Sutra? Raise your hand. Tori, you haven't read it yet? You got to read it. Okay. So, all right. So quite a few of you have read it. And the thing is that, did you really read it? Did you really read it? Or did you just read words? Remember, I was telling you there's three ways to do things. One of them is just read the words. The other one is get into the profoundness of it, wisdom. And the other one is the esoteric aspect, the secret one that's beyond words. So it's interesting because when we look at the Platform Sutra, right from the very, very beginning, it is telling you things that you just go, okay, that's good. Let me flip to the next page. So in the first section of it, and it depends on using Master Shenhua's interpretation, Huineng, when he was, depending on who you read, 22 or 24 years old, heard someone say, was reciting the Heart Sutra and said that one should place the mind where it has not been developed or how did he say it? Is not supported in any way. So saying the mind is not supported by any concept. And that's what we do, is that we have a mind that's not supported by a concept. No, it doesn't say, I am Gilbert, I am a Dharma teacher, I must know all this stuff, I am greater than you, or whatever. It doesn't do that. It is like I had mentioned last week or 2 weeks ago, like Shifu, you are big, I am small, you have everything, I have nothing. And we work in this way, in this great humility. We don't need anything to be established by the self. We don't have to support anything by appearances. And that's what I've been talking about in this time. The very first thing, Hui Ning, because he was able to hear it right away, he got it because of his deep root. When he was being born, two, I'll call them mendicants, came to his parents and told him that his name should be Hui Ning. And forgive me, those who speak Chinese and how I butcher his name. But one of them means above and one means below, Hui, above, below. So the thing was saying this connection between mind and samsara and the explanations that are there. It's perfect. His name already was presenting the Dharma. And when we see that, it's very, very important. Like I said, did you really read the Platform Sutra? And we're going to run out of time, but I wanted to run into some of it if I can. So I give you an idea of this. Since you guys already know the story roughly, I'm going to jump a little bit ahead. This was from one of his first speeches that he was saying. And he was saying to the people in the congregation, he goes, I come here today because I have a connection of many lifetimes with you, officials, clerics, lay people. This teaching has been passed down by the ancients. It isn't something that I discovered by myself. But if you wish to hear this teaching of the ancients, you must listen with pure minds. I'm now using Red Pine's version. And if you wish to get rid of your delusions, you should understand it as past generations have. And then he yelled out, good friends, you already possess the prajna wisdom of enlightenment. But because your minds are deluded, you can't understand by yourselves. You need to find a truly good friend to show you the way to see your nature. Good friends, Buddha nature isn't different for the ignorant or the wise. It is just that people are deluded or awake. When people are deluded, they're ignorant. When they wake up, they become wise. Good friends, this Dharma teaching of mine is based on meditation and wisdom. Here, as I mentioned a few weeks past, this idea of meditation is more than just sitting in meditation. It's more the practice of the Dharma practice of right view. But don't make a mistake of thinking that meditation and wisdom are separate. So he said, don't mistake that the practice and wisdom are two different things. When we sit to meditate, we sit using wisdom. We have our worldly wisdom, and eventually that's leading to Anyatara Samyak Sambodhi, this super mundane wisdom. But initially, we use wisdom combined with the quietness and the proper practice of right view. Meditation and wisdom are the one essence, not two. Meditation is the body of wisdom, and wisdom is the function of meditation. So meditation is the body of the wisdom, how it's being put into practice, and wisdom is the function of meditation. It is why you practice. They're connected. Whenever you find wisdom, you find meditation. And wherever you find meditation, you find wisdom. Good friends, what this means is meditation and wisdom are the same. Fellow students of the way, be careful. Don't think that meditation comes first and then gives rise to wisdom, or that wisdom comes first and gives rise to meditation, or that meditation and wisdom are separate. For those who hold such views, the Dharma is dualistic. If the mouth speaks of goodness, but the mind doesn't think of goodness, meditation and wisdom aren't the same. But if goodness pervades both the mouth and the mind, if that is what is external, internal are alike, then meditation and wisdom are the same. The cultivation of self-awareness does not involve argument. People who argue about which comes first and which comes second only confuse themselves. Unless you put an end to the right and wrong, you will give rise to the self-existence dharmas, and you will never be able to be free from the four states. In this way, you begin to see why Nagarjuna was not as expressing an alternative viewpoint to it. He was just simply presenting the flaws in the persons, but not arguing another point of view, which is very interesting. What he was doing was inviting people to either prove that he was wrong or become awakened by the fact of saying that he wasn't wrong. It's different. It was not argument, actually. One practice, samadhi, means at all times, whether walking, standing, sitting, lying down, always practicing with a straightforward mind. The Vilamakritti Sutra says a straightforward mind is the place of enlightenment. They say straightforward mind. I use the term sincere. We have to practice with this sincere mind. That sincere is straight. It's clear. It is what you get. And there's no faults there. Don't practice hypocrisy with your mind while you talk about being straightforward with your mouth. If you speak about one practice samadhi with your mouth, but you don't practice with a straightforward mind, you are no disciple of the Buddha. Simply practice with a straightforward mind and do not become attached to any dharma. This is what is meant by one practice samadhi. So essentially, there's a sincerity there that you stay in the present moment. You don't discriminate. You don't attach to anything that's there. The mind is like water. All of these sensations and things and forms, they're like water hitting a duck's back. It just rolls off of it. It doesn't stick. The duck can experience that the water is hitting them, but it doesn't absorb through or stick to the duck. Deluded people who cling to external attributes of a dharma get hold of the one practice samadhi and just say that sitting motionlessly, eliminating delusions, and not thinking thoughts is one practice samadhi. But if that is true, a dharma like that would be the same as lifelessness and would not constitute an obstruction, and would constitute an obstruction of the way. So he's saying if you just say you're sitting motionlessly, eliminating delusions, and not thinking thoughts. So he's distinguishing between the functional mind and a mind that, let's say, in meditation would be in a dark cave, what they call dark cave samadhi, which is that it blocks everything. In in what he's saying is everything is there, everything is experienced. It's just not attached to. It's functional. And that's what's important. Otherwise, it tends towards the nihilistic. The way has to flow freely. Why block it up? The way flows freely when the mind doesn't dwell on any Dharma. Once it dwells on something, it becomes bound. If sitting motionlessly were right, Vilamakruti wouldn't have, excuse me, I might have a, sorry, I think I might have had the pages come out of order. I think I messed it up in terms of the order here. So I'm going to stop there for right now, and we'll pick it up. There's quite a bit more of this I want to talk about Hui Ning, and I want to talk also about in the approach of Nagarjuna, and I think it's something that is very useful for us to use this as one of the early Chan sutras that was developed contemporaneous with the development of Chan itself, and you see that it stays consistent with the early teachings from that century of 100 CE to 250 CE. So even though this is now maybe 700 CE or 7th century, then it's still something that is consistent. And that's what I want to show you, is by taking different approaches, different sutras from different time periods and different viewpoints to show you that it's all connected. We're going to take our time. We're going to go through this. Some of you, it may be very confusing initially, but please bear in mind, you'll get it little by little. It will come to you, and it will sort. And if you don't believe me, do it, and then try to explain it to somebody that hasn't heard this, and they'll go, "I have no idea what you're talking about," because they haven't been exposed to it. But little by little, as you're exposed to it, you see that this is the true value of the sutras and the treatises, where you're now looking at it and going, oh, and that was just the beginning of the Platform Sutra. We haven't even got in deep, and it's already saying this to you, and it's amazing, how it works. And then we'll get into probably Master Shenhua's translation too. It's kind of interesting because the two translations are a little bit different and have a different flavor to them. Not necessarily to say one is correct and the one isn't, but sometimes you get a different flavor for it depending on who's translating it. And so it's a very interesting thing in terms of how we look at it. Okay, we'll finish up there, and we'll continue on next week. And I'll open it up for questions. Tori first.
Thank you so much, Gilbert, for today's talk. My question is that I'm currently reading Surangama Sutra. I find it very helpful, and it's quite long. But since you recommended the Platform Sutra, do you think I should maybe take a break from Surangama and then start and finishing reading the Platform first?
No, continue on. Hold on. It's interesting because I was reading, let me see if I can find it. Let me read you something that Master Shenhua was talking about. And it said, the Dharma master Shen Quan searched for his mind. He looked in the directions north, east, west, south, and intermediate points, and up and down. And he also looked in the 7 places that Venerable Ananda looked in the when Shakyamuni Buddha asked him the same question, where is his mind? So no, just you're in the right spot. And let me, so it said, and that is, and see, this is for you for today. So I was waiting for your question. And so in the Shurangama Sutra, he said he looked inside his body, he looked outside his body, he looked for it hidden somewhere in his sense organs, he looked where there was light, he looked at the place where conditions came together, he looked in the middle between the organs and their objects, and finally he looked at the place of non-attachment, which is no place. And so that was what Ananda was doing, but that was also what Shen Quan was doing as well. And so no, you're in the right place, absolutely, because all of that first volume, all of this is happening. Okay. Right. So that's perfect place for you to be. It doesn't matter. That door will get you there. So I'm very happy that you're reading it, and there's a reason why, you that kind of called to you. Okay. So good.
It calls to me. I'm so glad.
Absolutely. Stay there. That's why I said, this was all, that little passage there was all waiting for you to ask. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Harry.
Hi, Gilbert. Thanks again for your teaching. Well, you started out your talk talking about someone who tries to put their hand through their desk and they can't. And because they can't, they think that their perceptions are real. So I wanted, perhaps you could comment on someone who is samsarically imprisoned like that. What are all the assumptions that they're making, in order to come to that conclusion? I mean, there's the ego is involved in 10,000 different ways, and all sorts of wrong view, projections of the mind, so many different things that the person is attaching to, which are unreal. So I was, that's my first question. And then because it seems so relevant, I just wanted to read the first 2 lines of Genjo Koan, which really I think are what you've been talking about. So the first one is, when all dharmas are the Buddha Dharma, there is delusion and realization, practice, life and death, Buddhas and living beings. And number 2, when the 10,000 dharmas are without fixed self, there is no delusion and no realization, no Buddhas and no living beings, no birth and no death. So this is kind of the absolute, another way of talking about the absolute and relative.
This is the realization of the practice. And so they're expressing it in that way. And you could say it's something in which somebody has to work on. What does that mean? Why did they say it in that way? And look at it and try to process it as some kind of a Rubik's cube, twisting it this way and that way and looking at it. And it isn't necessarily that one is looking for an answer. It is the sincere process of investigating it that is important in terms of it. In our, I say our, like everyday life, it is the fundamental ignorance of the self that creates the illusion that we're there. It is that illusory ego and the self-nature of mind that keeps us trapped. It sounds very weird to say it in that way, but that self-nature of mind is the Buddha. But it keeps us kind of like in this swirl that's caused, let's say, if we look at it from quantum mechanics, Einstein way of looking at space, and there's this little swirl going like this in there, and we get stuck in that swirl, nevertheless, is part of the cosmos, created by the cosmos. It's not separate from it. We don't understand that, and we have an ignorance of it. So we want to brush it off. Okay. We want to get rid of it, and because of time, I'll retrace my steps now and go back to Huining and the mere stand bright, and where's there dust to a light type of approach as well, because I think that will be helpful, especially for people that are novices, and then gives every one of you kind of like a new viewpoint of that whole story. And it's important that we see that all of that is a self-nature of mind. We cannot say that it's sacred or profane. The difficulty in all of that is hard because we have to look at it from this viewpoint. It's something that when we look at the idea of compassion, we have to see this is a special kind of compassion. It's different. It's not this individual compassion. It's a compassion of the Buddha body that says, if this finger is hurt, this hand will take care of it. We'll rub it. We'll take care of it. It doesn't say, it doesn't belong to me, and that's the Dharmakaya. And so when we see that, and we see that there's this body there, of course, the mind is going to take care of the body, just like you would take care of your body. Your body is a microcosm, a very cardboardy figure of the Buddha mind. And so as we see that there's something there that's different. But what's hard for us to fathom is, if the Buddha mind is so powerful, why can't I just wipe in a brush stroke and remove all the suffering? And we don't know that because we don't know how long this has been going on. It could have happened in a blink of the Buddha's eye. If the Buddha had an eye, it would just go like, oh, that was a lot of suffering. Pooh, it's over with. Okay. And so it's just a blip, but we don't know how to time that. We don't understand that, but we know how it's set into motion. That's what Shakyamuni Buddha told us about. This law of dependent origination, Pratika Samappada, is the Buddha mind. It's difficult for us to do that because we want to look at it. And like I've mentioned many times, because people will look and say, well, God created everything. And you just go, and? What do you mean, and? Why did he create this world? Just like Woody Allen said, if God created the world, he was an underachiever. It doesn't make any sense, right? It doesn't make sense. And so if we anthropomorphize the Buddha and said the Buddha is responsible for that, it is in some way, yes, because it's all interconnected, but it works with Pratika Samappada. And we're anthropomorphizing that there is a Buddha, this one Buddha that sits on a golden throne, who knows where, maybe up into Sita heaven or the top of Mount Sumeru or whatever other idealistic, imaginings we can come up with. But it isn't in that way. We've got to move beyond those kinds of things. Doesn't mean that I don't bow to the Buddha statues every morning, because I know what they represent. And I know that I draw my wisdom and compassion from that faith. But I don't see it as there is a Buddha, this omniscient Buddha, one Buddha that controls everything. That would be monistic. And Buddhism is not monistic. So it's interesting. I'm speaking to you directly, Harry, to give you a lot of food for thought about this, because this has been what's been churning in my mind for the past couple of weeks. So I'm passing it over to you. Okay.
Thank you.
I was talking to Michael, and Michael got me on this whole thing of consciousness and quantum mechanics, and that had me going for a while as well, and then trying to distinguish and go, okay, well then what do we say? That's why I was addressing the issue of consciousness and seeing it as a little bit different animal than we think it is. So we're using this anthropomorphized version. Anthropomorphized being like we change it into human explanation as to what consciousness is, but consciousness is not in that way. It is the awareness of the mind that's critical. So that gives you something to think about, and Michael, something for you to contemplate as well. Okay, Sam.
Hey, Gilbert. I actually first, before any questions, I just really want to thank you for today's lecture and the last lecture too. This deep esoteric wisdom that you touch on so well. It's something I feel like I've been searching for in this life since I could think. And just hearing you say it, it's kind of like going like, wow, like it feels like it's been a long time coming, but it's finally here. And then looking back, it's kind of like feeling like this is something intrinsic. So just thank you for the way you present this deep wisdom and how it seems very hard to find someone who's willing to expound it how you are. So just thank you. But my actual question is in reference to Nagarjuna. Just the other day, I was reading something about him, and I may have misinterpreted, so I did want to see if you knew, but did Nagarjuna warn against turning emptiness into a view?
I think he was cautious about that. I don't think he worried about it. He was very, very cautious in terms of turning it in. When we talk about right view, we're actually talking about using the mind's own perception to see things, which actually transcends samsaric argument. And so he didn't want to do it as the same way as I related Villamakritti's silence. And say, I can only take you to where I can undercut your argument, but you have to take it the rest of the way. And people who were foes would feel just defeated. They wouldn't, but somebody with a deep root will go, wait, let me take a look at this. This is something that demands some kind of a scrutiny or contemplation about. And so it's not so much of a view as much as that it is something that it was a device to neutralize the idea that there is some, let's say, monistic supreme being that's there that created everything and that everything is following and that this world is real. And his essentially undercutting was a very popular debate device during his time period. He just happened to perfect it. And he used it, again, in a way, not from a philosophical viewpoint, which a lot of philosophers and historians relate it. But I understand what he was doing with it. He was doing it because this particular type of an argument was the best to bring the mind to a halt. And again, encourage people to look at it and to say, if these things that we believe are truths are not truths, then what? And that that's why I always say, what is the question? And that is not a question that I presented right now. That is the answer. What?
You said that recently in a conversation we had in comments. I believe it was on Michael's post. You said for me to go back and look at my questions and to remove the question mark, and there's your answer, or something along those lines. So, I think I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay, Michael.
Hello, Gilbert. So I wanted to ask you about whether we can elaborate a bit more about the difference of mind and consciousness, because in other systems, I mean, right now, your students are quite acquainted to the way you talk about mind and differentiate it to consciousness. When I talk to people from other faith traditions, they invert it. They put consciousness as the absolute, and and then mind as he deluded. So it's I think it's would be useful to at some point come to a very clear understanding what is the feature of consciousness. So on the forum we elaborated that the consciousness can appear without the self, but maybe it has a time component to it. So it's like unsteady. So,
Hey,
yeah, exactly.
that's mind. Everything after that was just this consciousness.
Which had an ego component to it. Right?
So there's no ego to that is just observed. So whatever mind is aware of itself by its self nature, but that self nature again do not anthropomorphize it or create it as some kind of a higher level ego. Consciousness just arises in accordance with causes and conditions. If there was not the arising of the phenomena, then consciousness, which we might equate to the seventh consciousness, would have nothing to support it, and it would have to collapse.
So it's possible to have mind without consciousness?
Well, in the way that people present consciousness, that's why I use the term awareness. Because awareness is that mind is aware. How can it not be aware? It's like your body, you can be aware if you have a rock in your shoe. Okay. So you're aware. And so, but we get into this trap. And that's why if you look at the mind work processes that I've been doing, I've been correcting that so that people don't try to get to a higher level of ego that is there. I want to take that chair that they're on and kick it out from underneath them and let them fall flat right onto the mind ground itself, so that they have nothing to support all of these things. It's what the sutras talk about, people building castles in the sky, or the horns of a hare, or the hair of a tortoise. All of those are saying these are non-existent things. And we cannot build a castle in the sky because there's no foundation to it. That's why the Platform Sutra is there, is to present that foundation. And so when we present the foundation, and we'll get into the idea of Huineng's no thought and this Wu Yin. And so when we begin to see that, we begin to understand more about this. The consciousness, and Michael, you're absolutely right. A lot of people use that, and a lot of, how would you say, new agey people, Johnny come latelys that come into it use consciousness a lot. And because it's their lack of understanding and their ignorance to believe that can be supported, but it cannot be. But because if you begin to look at it, it has no foundation. Mind has foundation. So what is the primary meaning of mind? Mind, right? What is the substance of mind? Mind. But when we look at that and we say consciousness, of course, consciousness belongs to mind, so it's part of mind, but it is not on the noumenon side. Awareness is. But consciousness is just something that rises and falls in accordance with things. I'm conscious of the temperature of the room. I'm conscious that the air conditioner turned off. I'm conscious of, but it has nothing to do with or affects my lecture. It's just that mind is aware of that, but that doesn't mean that I'm enlightened because of that, or that I have an enlightened consciousness. That is a very last trick of the ego. The last trick of the ego is to say, that's it, I got it. And that was, if you look at what was in the Shurangama, and he finally said he looked at the place of non-attachment, which is no place. And so So he was looking, and really was still attaching in some way, whatever we attach to, and so then we have this mind that thinks, oh, I'm not attaching, therefore this is the real mind. But the ego is superimposed over that. And we have to be very careful. I have to find the part, and maybe somebody will remember, maybe Santha, about Mahabua and his talking about that, which is very, very helpful in terms of the last stages of one of his practitioners, and explaining to them that that's something that's worth going over again at this time because of that. I think that this is not easy to get. It's okay. You guys are all in the right place. Stay with it. Okay. Stay with it. You're getting closer to it just simply by at least hearing the right view. Okay. Any other questions on that, Michael? No? Okay. All right, Robert. And I had one for you today too, but I didn't get to it. About a parrot. Go ahead. Can you give the parrot there you are.
Thank you, Gilbert. While you're talking just now, a word you mentioned several years ago about the word is knowing, K-N-O-W, knowing. So can you kind of, I know there's a difference of consciousness, knowing, and then the word awareness is knowing is almost, can you expand a little bit more? Maybe that itself is a lecture by itself and we don't have enough time for that.
No, I can do that, and I'm just smiling because I really feel sorry I ran out of time, because the whole thing about a parrot was very, very good, but it would take too long to explain it right now. So you have to tune in next week about it.
Yeah.
But in any case, the idea of knowing, we could talk about it as from the term Gnostic. Gnostic, Gnostic, and this is kind of a intuitive realization. You can't even call it really an understanding, because it's really beyond knowing. It is a direct communication with the mind. The Christians used it as a direct communication with God, and so in any case, that's something that I think is a way that we would look at this and say that when one has this kind of a realization, then we see that the awareness of mind is a better term than to say consciousness, because when we refer to it as consciousness, then it cheapens it, and that's where you get stuck a lot on. You're there, and you want to drag this consciousness with you, and so you have to go beyond that. Just like when you were doing your sweeping, just keep sweeping, sweep that right out. Forget about consciousness. Forget about, just look. And so this knowing that you're bringing up now is where you should look at. Okay, it's this Gnostic, this kind of a realization from that viewpoint. And I don't know if somebody can type out Gnostic so people can see it, the word in the notes. And so, but that's important for you to kind of take a look at that and to see it in that way, because that is one that the Christians would say is a bridge to the divine. We would say it is essentially a hole in the sky. Okay. And where you can take a peek out from. Okay. How did that hole in the sky get there? It's always been there. Everything is an illusion here. So it's easy to for the illusion to be there. But remember what Shifu used to tell me, remember, Gilbert, it only stops for you. So then you have to keep working. Okay. Did I answer your question? Okay, good. Yeah, I'm been hitting you with a lot of that, in the Mind Work Forum, just simply for you to give you food for thought too, or actually food for contemplation. Okay. All right, good. Any last questions? No.